Wireplumber is what everyone has basically adopted now, but there was another main session manager everyone was using previously that has now been deprecated, that being Pipewire Media Session. So what was different about that, and why does Wireplumber exist, I guess is the simplest way to put it.
That's a great question. Yeah. So Wireplumber started back in 2018, I think it was, where we were focusing on automotive with use cases. We started as a session manager for automotive grade Linux
Mhm.
initially, because at the time, automotive grade Linux was using ALSA. Basically, it wasn't using Pulse Audio even. It was a custom setup on top of ALSA. I was doing crazy things that didn't fully work, and I brought in Pipewire and I said, okay, this is the audio server that we're going to be using in the future. Everybody is going to adopt that. This is the new thing, and we decided to adopt Pipewire in AGL. But the problem was that there was no session manager. It wasn't creating links, and we needed some tool for that. So Wirepluber was born out of that use case, and at the time, Pipewire was still in the 0.2 version.
Mhm.
It was like before it was popular, and there were a couple of things being done differently there, and we had to come up with structures to make all of that work. And we spent a lot of time on that, and we spent time also creating the tooling for AGL, make sure we have everything. Now, as we focused on the AGL, because we had quite hard deadlines as well, we had only a few months to come up with something. We didn't pay attention to the desktop. So we didn't create desktop policies. We didn't touch any of the Pulse Audio-like functionality. And we didn't even think about it. So the initial version was not designed to be able to be expanded to Pulse Audio-like functionality, right? It was very difficult to do that. And so, and I guess it was 1 year later or so, we started looking into that and we had to rewrite a lot of things. And that was taking a long time. And the Fedora people were eager to get Pipewire out the door on Fedora.
Mhm.
And they were kind of pushing Wim, I guess, to come up with a solution to have something, because Wireplumber wasn't ready, even though it was seemingly the best approach for the future, like because we were building Wireplumber in a way that's modular,
Mhm.
and also we wanted to integrate scripting. We wanted to integrate all of these features that would make it a good end user tool. But we didn't have any of that. So Wim started writing the Pipewire Media Session,
Mhm.
which was a very simple version of all of that, all written in C,
Mhm.
uh, with hard-coded policies, with no settings.
Uh-huh.
It was basically trying to do whatever Pulse Audio was doing, hard-coded. No possibility of changing anything. Just make sure that the basics work.
Mhm.
No customization whatsoever. And it was clear from the beginning, right? This tool was created just to be able to support the transition from Pulse Audio to Pipewire.
It was to
But
get
it was,
something there so it could be done.
yeah, exactly. Just to be able to support that and work for the initial transition so that people could also test it, because Pipewire was not something that people could use because they had to understand how to create links themselves, right? So it wasn't a tool that was actually usable even among developers. Like, developers wouldn't know how to do that, so you had to teach them. And we didn't have the graph tools as well, that the UI tools that we have today. So you had to do it on the command line, and the command line is is tricky, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically it was a tool to get things done. But we knew from the beginning that this was not going to continue for a long time. And we started porting Wireplumber to a new architecture at some point that was able to accommodate all of this desktop policy.
Mhm.
And at some point, when we had something ready, we started showing to people how they can transition from Pipewire Media Session to Wireplumber and how to run that. And our initial goal was to be on par when it comes to functionality, have exactly the same functionality. But then we surpassed that. We have more functionality today, and yeah, as it became stable and usable and had more functionality, we decided to deprecate Pipewire Media Session. It's as simple as that.
Okay, so it was basically just needed to be there so that the transition could be done, that people could test it, and I guess with Fedora kind of pushing for it, if I remember my history correctly, that probably would have been not long before there was like a lot of work done to get video capture done on Wayland, and there wasn't really a generic way to do that before. So I guess that probably aligns with that. They saw Pipewire was gonna be a thing that could do this, because before GNOME was doing their own thing and WL Roots had their own thing and KDE had their own thing, and that was never gonna be viable for an application like OBS. You could never really build a generic screen capture tool like that because everyone would just have their own different thing. I want to say 2020 is when OBS got screen capture support on Wayland, something like that. I don't Maybe 2021. I know it was around that era though.
Yeah, I don't remember myself when exactly was that. But yeah, it was all driven by the Fedora developers, and they wanted a solution uh, to allow basically, yeah, screen capturing, but also passing through that video to Flatpak applications. And there was a lot of development around that. And basically, as I said earlier, much earlier, Pipewire was initially created for that. It was created for passing video around uh, from cameras to applications, but then it was clear that this could also do screencasting. So all of that was developed. And Pipewire Media Session was also a way to get that actually working, to have something create the links for you so that it works. Um, and yeah, it's been supported like that since then, even in Wireplumber.
So I guess we haven't really talked much about configuration you can do to Wireplumber. Now, I did make a video, and I probably should change the title now, because I made a video on this prior to the format change. So that video is entirely outdated now, and everything in it is wrong. So originally, the format was a Lua configuration file, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So why did it change?
Right. So I guess I need to take this from the top
Okay.
and start with why
What?
Lua in the first
Sure,
place.
okay.
Like how did we end up with Lua? In the initial stages of Wireplumber, we were writing all things in C, just like Pipewire Media Session, and we didn't have a lot of configuration. And at some point, we understood we needed, some level of configuration, people to be able to change things. The thing is, around that time we had a Hackfest. I remember we had a Hackfest. I don't exactly remember where it was, but I remember like it was. We were sitting down at a table with Wim and others, and one of the guys there, Bastian, he had come up with this idea to use Lua for configuration. At the time, I didn't know Lua. I didn't understand it as much. Like I knew it as I knew it existed. That was all I knew basically, and that it was used in some old games as a scripting language.
Right.
That's pretty much my knowledge about Lua. That was my knowledge about Lua at the time. So this guy brought the idea in, and he said he tried to convince us that this is something that is easily embeddable in a software that can also go into a device, but also it is very easy to write. It has all those very simple data structures that you can write scripts with, and it can basically support the configuration system with a scripting language, which would allow for more flexibility in the future. At the time, I didn't know Lua, as I said, so I didn't go for it immediately. We were in a rush to get things done for AGL, and so we invented a TOML-based configuration file, TOML file. We brought in a lib TOML something. There was a library, C++ library that we were using to parse that and write that. And we implemented that, but of course it was very, very limited. We have only a few options, and it was pretty much constrained to the default policy. And after we had fixed that for AGL and the deadline was out of the way and we had everything working there, we started looking into Lua. And there were two things in Lua. Like, it was initially suggested as a configuration format so that you can create a script that basically configures how you want things to be done in your graph and toggle some options and things like that. But it was evident that it was also a scripting format where we could write logic, real logic, actually policy logic there. Without thinking too much about it, we adopted it for both. Like we wrote a scripting engine, and then I said, okay, let's use that also for the configuration. So we had one engine basically that was supporting everything. And note that at the time, Pipewire didn't have a configuration file. So Pipewire was not configurable. We didn't have anything. No, actually, it had a configuration file, but it was a very, very minimal configuration file with a custom parser that was each line was parsed separately. It was like a INI format configuration file, something like that. It was a very simple thing just to configure which modules you want to load and things like that. That was not something we could take on in Wireplumber. It wasn't giving us enough options. So we thought, okay, what else do we have? We can continue using TOML, or we can go into Lua, which gives us more flexibility, or we can pull in another library that does something else, like JSON, for example, or something else. But I didn't like the idea of bringing in more dependencies. So I had Lua there, so we used that. And so it was built like that, and we had the scripting engine, which allows you to build the scripts that have the actual linking logic. And we had the configuration files that were toggling options, basically toggling settings and deciding which modules to load and things like that, also in Lua. Now, that didn't work very well because people didn't fully understand how to use that as a configuration file. And they were also very, very confused about, very confused because, there was the scripting in Lua, there was the configuration in Lua. They couldn't understand what's the difference between those two and where does the Lua file go, because if you put it there, it's a script. If you put it there, it's a config file. And they didn't understand also how to override things, because you had to think as a programmer. You had to think as if all the Lua files are being concatenated together, and then there is a parser that goes through every line and runs the program. That's how it was working. People didn't grasp that, so they were basically copying the Lua files from one place to the other. We were shipping them in user share as data files, and they were copying that in their home directory, and they were changing things there. without overriding, and overriding was hard. And that led to a lot of problems because as we were changing the default configuration, for example, to load new modules that we implemented, people who had copied their files didn't get the new modules, and then their Wireplumber was crashing because it was expecting things to be there and it wasn't there.
Yep.
It was a mess.
Yep.
It was a mess.
I was right there with it crashing. There was an update that shipped, I don't know, 3 years ago, whatever it was, and then all of a sudden I would plug in a device and then Wireplumber exploded. And I couldn't work out why. I just ended up taking the folder, renaming the folder to something that's not going to be loaded, and then I'm going to deal with it later.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That wasn't clear to the users. It was hard. So in the meantime, Pipewire developed this JSON-like configuration format that we have today, which is, well, it's not standard JSON. It's a more simple version of JSON, but it can be parsed as a JSON. And you can provide also JSON files if they will be parsed by the same parser. So it's something that also allows people who want to develop tools for creating those configuration files. This can work with a standard JSON library. And that seemed like a very, very good idea. So you have a file that people can easily edit, but it can also be generated by machine code. And it was more easy to implement overrides. And as Pipewire implemented that and people started using that, they started becoming familiar with that. It was a great way to do configuration and overrides. And basically, I thought at some point, yeah, let's get over with the Lua config files. Let's use that. It makes sense. People already know how to use it. It has clear advantages to doing configuration. And then I did that. And of course, that also confused people because now people were like, oh, but I thought we were done with Lua, but you still have Lua in there, right? But yeah, I kept the Lua scripting that didn't go anywhere, but we changed the configuration file. They were two entirely separate things.